Good morning. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Digital Threats to the Achievement of the SDGs, Libraries as the Target, a session organized by the Hammarskjöld Library as a side event to the 9th STI Forum. I want to welcome you all for joining us. The format for today is I will introduce our moderator, who will introduce our esteemed panelists. If you have questions during the presentations, please feel free to enter them into the chat and we will respond to them as we can. Our library team will be monitoring the chat throughout the session. After each panelist has spoken, we will then have a Q&A. I'd like to remind everyone that all UN system events are governed by the UN Code of Conduct. We will be putting the link to that into the chat feature as well, in case you're interested into what it is. I do want to point out that this session will be in English only. If you'd like to turn your captions on, you can do so from your own individual software. If you're having any problems, let us know in the chat. And now I am honored to introduce Thanos Giannakopoulos, our moderator for the event and the chief librarian of the Hammarskjöld Library. Over to you, Thanos.
Thank you, Ariel. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends of the UN Hammarskjöld Library. It is with great enthusiasm that I welcome you to the side event of the 2024 Science, Technology, and Innovation Forum. As we gear up for the high-level political forum in July 2024, we gathered here today to discuss a critical aspect of our interconnected world, cybersecurity and the attacks on libraries. This year, the HLPF, the High-Level Political Forum, will conduct a thorough review of several sustainable development goals, including goals aimed at eradicating poverty, achieving food security, combating climate change, promoting peace and justice while securing access to information, and strengthening global partnerships. Each of these goals is vital for a sustainable future, but they also present data-intensive challenges that necessitate robust digital protection. So the Hammarskjöld Library, named after the UN's visionary Secretary General, has stood as a beacon of knowledge about and for the UN for 79 years. Our mission extends beyond merely archiving past achievements. We strive to be a dynamic, comprehensive resource and a global community partner. Our goal is to empower individuals within and outside the UN to discover, connect, and build upon our extensive resources, bridging generations and borders through both physical and digital realms. Like other libraries around the world, we remain one of the most important guardians of facts about our organization in a digital information ecosystem that is polluted with misinformation and disinformation. The ongoing transition of libraries and their resources into the digital realm increases vulnerability to cyber threats. Recent incidents at major institutions like the Toronto Public Library, the New York Public Library, and the British Library underline the severity of these risks. These recent breaches not only disrupted services, but also threatened the integrity and availability of invaluable data, breaching also privacy requirements. The United Nations International Computing Center's report of 2023 warns us of an ever-evolving cyber threat landscape. From the weaponization of cyber tools in warfare to the risk posed by quantum computing, the potential to undermine our security systems is escalating. Most cybersecurity breaches exploit vulnerabilities through methods like phishing, spear phishing, or brute force attacks. This calls for a proactive and informed approach to cybersecurity, emphasizing the protection of networks, devices, and data from unauthorized access. The International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions has strongly advocated for robust security measures that respect user privacy. This includes promoting best practices in data collection and retention, and urging third-party vendors associated with libraries to implement stringent security protocols. This approach not only safeguards the institutions, but also ensures that library users can access services without facing undue risks. So to navigate these discussions, we have invited today a panel of esteemed experts who will share their insights and strategies. Our goal is to understand these challenges deeply and to discuss how libraries can not only respond to, but anticipate and mitigate these risks. So we look forward to learning, listening, and engaging. And our goal remains to protect these vital institutions, ensuring they remain safe, resilient, and accessible for all who depend on them. I'm going to initiate the discussion, and I would like to introduce my esteemed colleague, Tima Soni. Tima Soni, who is the Chief Cybersecurity Officer of the UN Information Computing Center. In 2019, Tima was appointed as Chief Cybersecurity Section that oversees the cybersecurity program for the United Nations Information Center for experts in New York, Valencia, Rome, and Geneva. And it serves over 40 subscribers to information security services. Tima has served as Chief Information Security Officer for several unique United Nations Information Security, Computing Center partner organizations, including UN Women and the Pan American Health Organization, and also served as the CISO for the United Nations Population Fund. Tima, the floor is yours. I would like now to move on to our second speaker, and I want to invite Ms. Gwen Evans, VP of Global Relations from ELSEVIER. Gwen has an extensive background in libraries. She was a former executive director of the Library Consortium Ohio Link, and was also an associate professor and coordinator of library information technologies at Bowling Green State University. In her current role, she serves as bridge between ELSEVIER and the library community globally. Gwen, the floor is yours.
Thank you for that introduction, and I'm really honored to be here presenting on this critical topic. I just want to mention, in my previous role as the executive director of Ohio Link, the state of Ohio's academic library consortium, I dealt with a hacking incident that brought down the statewide electronic theses and dissertation submission system and digital repository. So I have personal experience and interest in this. SNSI, I'm here as a member of the Scholarly Network Security Initiative, and it brings together publishers and institutions to tackle cyber challenges that threaten the integrity of the scientific record, research systems, and personal data. Although SNSI is focused on higher education and research organizations, our resources and webinars may also be relevant for other types of libraries and cultural heritage organizations. I have a feeling a lot of the panelists, will all be saying the same thing in different ways, which is good. But the education sector is the third largest target for cybercrime ahead of retail. Fake websites and login pages have been found spoofing library websites in order to steal login credentials. And the research done at academic institutions is often as valuable as the personal and financial data that ransomware attackers or hackers target. So recent headlines and events indicate that cybercrime is on the rise in the field of research. It's research content in both its published forms and in its raw state in the form of data and formulas in research institutions. Stolen, solicited, or phished credentials are a common attack vector, as with many cyber attacks, which is why robust authentication and access controls are critical. It's notable that the London police specifically warned universities about using Sci-Hub, which is in Russian cyberspace. And since the invasion of Ukraine, those concerns have become even more acute for European universities. Over 400 universities and institutions across 41 countries have reported their networks and data have been compromised by illegal websites. There are two resources that I want to point you to. One was just published on Monday, May 7th, and it's specifically giving an overview of this very topic on digital cultural heritage. And I was particularly struck by the author's use of the phrase, the illusion of invulnerability in the digital context. The second, as the previous panelist mentioned, is the British Library's report on their cyber attack, and I can't recommend reading this report enough. It's honest, thought-provoking, and especially relevant for libraries running complex services. The report highlights the risks of continuing to use outdated systems and network architecture, and the impact of the attack included educational or research disruptions, financial losses, legal risk, and a host of other issues. So read the report and reflect on your own organization's cybersecurity posture. So what makes a soft target? At the most common level, as discussed, the motivation for many attacks is not to target an individual organization. Attackers exploit known system vulnerabilities using automated tools, enhanced by AI now, in a bulk approach. And even small amounts of ransomware money are meaningful in some parts of the world. The best defense is that proactive security, cybersecurity hygiene, strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, and training, and that is relevant for any kind of organization. A growing concern for organizations is their legal risk when personal data is compromised. Exposure of personal staff, student, or patron data increases the chances of identity theft and the costs of mitigation for the organization that exposed that data. In addition, we're finding without strong information security protocols in place, institutions like universities and colleges may struggle to get cybersecurity insurance, which is increasingly prudent and necessary. Research, library, and archival content are also targets for ideological manipulation, as author Gwen discusses. As the head of circulation and access services in various libraries, I've managed access to high-value physical special collections as well as general collections. As part of circulation, my team and I also ensured a safe and secure environment for our patrons. In our various libraries and archives, we've always required proof of identity, proof of status, or statements of intended use. We navigate the spectrum between public libraries where anyone can enter to browse, but you still need credentials to borrow, university libraries where access and terms of use can be different for different groups, students, faculty, on campus and off, to closed archives which have much stricter access and handling requirements. There's an overarching rationale of balancing the protection and integrity of the content we hold with the effective use and access to it for users and future users. I suggest applying those same overarching principles and scrutiny to our digital environments. What does it take to ensure our content remains whole and original and legacy software doesn't put operations and content at risk? How do we keep our digital environment secure for users and don't expose them to individual risk? We owe a duty to our users, which covers both content integrity and platform integrity. Digital preservation software used by organizations like Clocks checks for alteration and corruption in the dark archival copy, and perhaps for sensitive content, it is time for our profession to perform similar integrity checks on the access copies on a regular basis. In addition, any download, including PDFs and images, can be loaded with malware. A lot of small popular WordPress blogs, for example, have been compromised to deliver malware. Hackers are now exploiting open source software and inserting their own code to allow backdoor access for malicious purposes. Both staff and patrons should understand why certain protocols and recommendations are in place. Downloading from Sci-Hub and other pirate sites is really risky behavior. Those are sites that have already indicated that they're willing to break the law, and there's no guarantee that the content is an unaltered original, that ersatz content hasn't been inadvertently or deliberately uploaded, and it also doesn't carry an extra payload of malware. Now I'd like to highlight some key points from our freely available webinars on cybersecurity, which provide concrete examples, general overviews, and some case studies. This webinar features 2 librarians sharing their experience with ransomware attacks at their smaller institutions. But the most amazing part is Christina Vella Bisbee's case study from Columbia University Libraries, where she describes a persistent attempt by someone posing online as a student to access and attempt to alter the content in a database related to military security. The attacker attempted to exploit the library's service-oriented culture, turning professional values into a vulnerability. This underlies the risk our profession faces due to our focus on openness and service. It's crucial to be aware of the security vulnerabilities that come with that orientation. Our culture, geared towards serving users, can make us susceptible to certain types of social engineering attacks, and security awareness and training for all employees is key, including student employees if you use them at a college or university. This webinar focuses or features Dean Emily McElroy at the University of Nebraska Medical Center Library, sharing the aftermath of their ransomware attack and how the security audit identified core library technology as a risk. Their institution wouldn't tolerate vulnerabilities, including their locally hosted integrated library system, easy proxy as an authentication method, and other very common library technology and workflows. They revamped their digital preservation strategy as their digitized dissertation files were lost in the original attack, and their backup copies turned out to be unusable because the IT department wasn't routinely testing the restore function, and the restore failed. This webinar focuses on training, workflow documentation as a factor for security, and other readiness materials. Where does your organization fall on the red, yellow, green matrix? The process of protecting digital content and environment is a journey to green. One of our panelists, Carlota Sage, a virtual chief information security officer or VCISO of the company Pocket CISO, provided the chart. And I want to mention that VCISO businesses, virtual CISO businesses, offer consulting and other part-time info security services to smaller organizations that aren't ready or can't afford a full-time CISO. And I want to make you aware that those businesses exist if your organization needs help in addressing cybersecurity. In 2022, many insurers canceled cybersecurity policies due to high risks. But now they're starting to ask the right critical questions about risk management and disaster recovery. Does your organization have a plan? Have they tested it? Do they have good basic cybersecurity protocols in place? I've given SNSI workshops designed to help libraries develop a service continuity plan and then stress test it with a tabletop exercise. Any organization can and should do this, no matter how small or large. My final urgent advice to you is to make a service continuity plan focused on cybersecurity risks, test the plan, start getting rid of your legacy software, and start this tomorrow. Thanks, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Gwen, for this intervention. I just mentioned in the chat that if there are any questions, please share them in the chat and I will be happy to bring them into the discussion. And also, I think we're now ready to experience a few technical problems, but I think we're now ready to move on to our next intervention and give the floor to our colleague Magnus Igbinovia. He is the head of Electronic Resources and Digital Support Services at the Umahi Federal University of Health Sciences. He is a certified librarian, list educated and researcher with interest in the intersection between libraries and sustainable development and how emerging technologies are reshaping library services delivery systems. He currently serves as the Electronic and Digital Support Service Librarian at Umahi Federal University of Health Sciences in Nigeria. Prior to this time, he was the head of Electronic Library Division at Ambrose Ali University at Homa, where he also taught as a part-time lecturer in the Department of Library Information Science. Magnus, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I am very honored to be on this platform, and I want to appreciate all the speakers that have spoken before me. Quickly, I will be talking about digital threats to the achievement of SDGs, libraries as a focus. Let's quickly go to the first slide. I would not want to bother us much on the concept of sustainable development goals, but I would want to make a remarkable statement that the International Federation of Library Association and Institutions have taken a front seat in driving this agenda. And we see this in the Lyon's Declaration of 2014, where they advocated that the access to information is a vital tool to sustainable development. And of course, in 2015, the IFLA held a conference, and in the 105 section, they also deliberated on how access to information can be a vital tool to achieving sustainable development. So quickly, I'll move on to the next slide, where I try to establish information as the connector between libraries and sustainable development goals. We've seen across the targets and the indicators that access to information is a recurring factor in the agenda. And we'll see in Goal 2C, Goal 3.7, Goal 9C, 12.8, and Goal 16.10. We all see that access to information keeps occurring. And of course, because this serves as a tool for societal transformation, and we also see that access to information is critical to achieving certain landmarks, so to say, of the sustainable development goals, like in the health sector, in the agriculture, in education, business and economy, where business information seems to be a tool that SM is used for growth, economic growth and development. And of course, we have it in the ICT and the internet services. The next slide, please. Now, we also see that librarians and the library is rightly positioned because of their role in providing access to information. They are rightly positioned to ensuring the attainment of sustainable development goals. So they can be considered as the hubs for SDGs actualization. And as part of what they do in offering or in providing these services, they manage the personal data of both the library users and the library professionals. And of course, they manage their information resources both in online and offline resources. These data that they manage, they become a threat for digital hacking and other cyber risks. So it makes it very, very particular for libraries to guide against digital threats. The next slide, please. We'll see some of the types of digital threats to libraries. Of course, we are familiar with the cyber cracking, the data breaches, spyware, denial of access, the phishing and the family, which my previous speaker said is one of the most pronounced cyber threats to libraries. And of course, because this has to do with social engineering, where users or personnel are the direct attack of this particular threat. I want to look at some of the causes of this cyber threat. First of all, high monetization of information resources. We find out that because people want to access information, and they are unable to get it because there's a paywall, there's an embargo to this information. They begin to seek alternative means to accessing this information. And these alternative means could include, hacking of an information system so that they can get information that they can not afford. And this is particularly prominent in the global south, where we have poor economic conditions. Then, of course, we have the radical ideologies. Some people believe that information should be a public good, and as such, it should not be for sale. It should not be commodified or monetized. You see, these ideologies instigate people to go ahead and hack information systems. And of course, I'll be speaking more from the global south perspective and from my previous research works. I found out that a lot of people from this part of the world believes that Western education is a sin, so to say. So those people, we find them going about attacking institutions of learning. And because we are now in the age of technology, it may transcend into taking the attack from the physical attack to the digital attack. Then we have the poor or lack of implementation of cybersecurity policies. I did a little survey and asking of questions, and I found out that most libraries in the Nigerian context, they do not have cybersecurity policies. In fact, it will be worse to say that they don't even have information security policies. This become a cause or a trigger or an enabler for digital threats. Then we have the poor cyber literacy. I did a study and I discovered that a lot of people, although they are aware of the concepts of cyber literacy, they are aware of the concept of cyber ethics, the concept of digital threats and cyber threats, they actually do not have enough knowledge to be able to adhere to cyber practices. And they also do not have the required capacity to be able to, follow up with the cyber security requirements and all of that. And we see that IFLA has come up with a digital literacy that can help us to actually tailor our literacy needs, to align with what is expected of us to know in terms of addressing the cybersecurity issues. And we see that in the statement of IFLA on digital literacy. Then on ethical cyber practices, it will amaze us to know that most of our users and even our library personnel, they do not know what they should do. They can't distinguish between the rightness and wrongness in cyber practices. Implication for sustainable development. How does these whole cyber threats affect the actualization of sustainable development goals? We find it that it derails public access to information. It causes a disruption in the information services, and this affects people from meeting their information needs. And also we see that it hinders public access to information, infrastructure, technological infrastructure, internet facilities, and all of that. And also when our users are exposed, their information are exposed to threats, and they are aware of this exposure, it gives them an apathy that will affect their return intention to the library. So when users know that their data has been hacked, they might have an apathy towards the library, which of course has a ripple effect in developmental agenda. Then loss of vital, historical, and indigenous knowledge from communities on agricultural practices, orthodox medicines, and all of that the libraries manage are lost to digital threats. And also, digital threat destroys the scholarly materials that drives research and innovation, making them inaccessible for consumption and subsequent developmental actions. And we see that some of this research contains research data that are essential or necessary for developmental projections. So I came up with some suggestions as a way forward. And for the first one, I want to ask some questions that could trigger further thoughts and reactions. For instance, is it possible for us to have something like a regulatory body that regularize or try to eliminate the costs on information resources? Of course, the goal is to have unhindered information resources, unhindered access to information resources. But we can start by having a regulatory body that eliminates those barriers, or at least regularize access to information on the ground of costs and people's inability to pay for this information. Then, of course, we see advocacy. We discover that there is a lot of lack of awareness. People are not aware of cybersecurity practices. So we need sustained and targeted campaigns and enlightenment to reform people's perception and attitude towards libraries and other information centers in order to caution possible threats or attacks based on people's tinted political or religious ideologies. The enactment and adoption of cybersecurity policies, this can be done in both the national level, the subnational level, and based on the peculiarities of individual libraries. Then another way forward is to ensure the adherence of cybersecurity measures, and some of these measures include the use of biometric technologies for identification, then encryption, end-to-end encryption. Libraries should ensure they do regular audits and assessment of the information system. There should be restrictions on the administrative computers. Then firewall protection should be used to prevent outside attack. The next slide. Now, what are the implications of this to policy making, to collaborations and all of that? Developing a cybersecurity policy is very essential, and I think organizations like the United Nations should see how they can come on in this particular area. They can develop cybersecurity policies, they can develop cybersecurity toolkits. For instance, IFLA has what they call the digital literacy toolkit. So we can have a semblance of that nature for cybersecurity toolkits. Then we can have national cybersecurity policies that create a consciousness or an awareness of cybersecurity practices. And we can have a collaboration with vendors of information systems, so that they can ensure that cybersecurity requirements are included in our information systems. I would want to conclude by affirming that technological advancement, which has greatly enhanced information service delivery, has also introduced digital threats to libraries. These threats need to be addressed to strengthen libraries' capacity for effective information service delivery. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Magnus. This is very interesting, and I'm glad we will have your slides and also to share them and the recording at the end of this event. I would like now, just being mindful of the time, and in order to have a little bit of time at the end for at least a couple of questions, but I have some ideas how we could address these questions. I'd like now to give the floor to our esteemed colleague, Edmund Balnaves. Edmund is the division chair in the International Federation of Library Associations and past chair of the IFLA Information Technology section. He's also the CEO of Prosentient Systems in Australia and an active technologist in the library field. He's actively engaged in the delivery and development of library systems and artificial intelligence enhanced discovery for libraries. And I think we saw also artificial intelligence already mentioned, Edmund. His doctoral research was in the area of systematic content, reuse, and metadata. His business provides cloud-based library services. His InterSearch hosted services are used by over 500 libraries in Australia and the Asia Pacific region. Edmund, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And it's a great privilege to be presenting in this very interesting webinar. I'll try and keep my thoughts in this session succinct because there's been a great deal of information already shared. So I'll try not to repeat some of the wisdom that's already been covered within this session. I'm the custodian of, as we just heard, over 500 libraries, many operating in the cloud in an internet environment. So they sit very vulnerable to the modern techniques for intrusion and attack. In my role in the International Federation of Library Associations as chair of the IT section, I facilitated the standard guidelines for cybersecurity published by IFLA, their statement on cybersecurity. And within my business, as I said, as a custodian, I have to take great care for the management of the infrastructure for the delivery of what are quite vital services across many different types of libraries. And the library is an attack target. It is so as a custodian because it has patron records, images. Images are a very valuable target these days because there's a lot of associated metadata with images that can be used, but also usage metadata, what people have read, what people have borrowed. Also, their digital assets and their physical assets are of interest as an attack target for various different reasons. And also with the SDGs, the role of the library as a trusted institution, providing access to information and resources and bridging for the SDGs a crucial digital divide, and providing, in many cases, quite critical research resources. So I look after many hospital libraries, for instance, who provide online access on a day-to-day basis of quite critical research information to be addressed immediately by the health services. And there are many cyber risks to the library, not least of them data theft and blackmail, patron information, including financial information about patrons. Within the public library sector, there might be fines, and in taking fines, recording financial information about those fines payments. Staff information, and libraries operate in many different sectors, as we've heard, also defence, public health. They're very attractive targets for this sort of attack. But also the cyber risks lie in the infrastructure itself. So compromised services, software poisoning of the upstream resources that you're using, ransomware attacks, cyber attacks, misuse of the network itself, so that when your patrons come in to use the library service, to what degree can they misuse those resources and infrastructure in any number of ways. It can be in gross misuse of the resources through leveraging your network for Bitcoin mining. It can be through distribution of pornographic services. It can be through passive monitoring on your network of what other people are doing. But also within the infrastructure, you've got to be aware that technology is all around you. So the building itself can be a target, and there's all of the devices that are around the building for security, for management. That Internet of Things, they're also a framework of risk. Many video security services, for instance, have default passwords, and can be piggybacked so that the information that's gathered by them can also be monitored by others. So I feel in my environment, if you've ever played the Space Invaders game where the invaders come down, descending down, attacking you, and you're trying to shoot them down, that it's a Space Invaders game with one life. If you don't get them all, then unless you have a recovery structure, the damage can be severe. And we've heard about that with the British Library cyber attack, so I won't dwell on that too much. There's some very good reading on that, as you've heard. The point being that it was a catastrophic attack. It was a ransomware attack, so they were attempting to leverage the information to make money out of the data that they'd exfiltrated. They'd exfiltrated a lot of data from the system, that is, stolen a lot of the information about patrons, about staff, but also critically that they had unrecoverable internal systems, that they didn't have the infrastructure whereby after the attack they couldn't bring back their systems to where they were. An absolutely disastrous result for them. And when we talk about that in terms of SDGs and the impact of cybercrime, when an incident happens, you've got the immediate impact: loss of service, breach of patron data, loss of resources, and the cost to your library of recovery. Libraries are not well-resourced institutions quite often within the ecosystem of they deliver information often on a tiny resource, brilliantly done, and are quite crucial to local communities that they serve. And so the cost of recovery can be very damaging to the library and therefore its ability to deliver services. But there's also the loss of trust when an incident happens, the loss of trust by the community that they serve. And as you've heard, the legal risk to the institution. But it doesn't stop there, because you've got follow-on consequential impact of that exfiltrated data. The follow-on financial theft that happens for the information that they've gathered, because they don't just gather the information in isolation, they combine that with information that's been stolen in other environments. There's impersonation, blackmail, and potentially, where it's done by a state institution, government misuse of that data. And all of that means compromised SDGs, the loss of development opportunities, the loss of the role of the library as a critical institution. So this is pretty serious stuff. And there are many sources of risk. Some are external, that is exploitation of your IT infrastructure. Many libraries don't have direct agency over the infrastructure that they're using. And so therefore they need to be a party in the IT service layer discussion about the delivery of those services. The biggest risk, and this was highlighted by the British Library, is unpatched, outdated software. This comes up time after time, outdated software, outdated infrastructure, outdated routers, so many layers that are not kept current. And it becomes a critical point of vigilance to be current with all of the systems. You've heard also that risk of software poisoning, that is injecting software in the upstream suppliers' systems. And it's not just open source, it's commercial software as well, where they inject software in the infrastructure of the delivery of that software so that you are unconsciously introducing risk into your network. But also, and probably highest, is the internal risk. The risk of clickbait introduction through phishing systems, an email that comes in that looks so genuine, an invoice that looks like it should be clicked on to be paid, a DocuSign document that looks absolutely genuine, a pleading email, as we've had within IFLA. I get emails purporting to be from the IFLA Secretary General saying that they need assistance with something. Very widespread. AI has exacerbated it, but it was happening already. There's the patron misuse of library resources. When a patron with malicious intent comes in, they may be hijacking the resources the library supplies. So how secure are your systems that provide services to patron to ensure that the patrons don't harm other patrons? And there's the librarian duty of care of patron data. And as you've heard, librarians come with a service-oriented architecture, and they also like to understand their patrons. So they gather a lot of information about patrons, the demographics, the information about loan history and so on, so that they can improve their service. But in this modern age, there needs to be a focus on reducing the risk of that data. Don't keep more information than you need to. Have layers of protection around that data so that not everyone can run a report to say, give me everything about patrons. We have, for instance, whenever a librarian wants to run a report on patron information, they have to get an approved token from another authorization agent to say it's okay to run that report. Auditing and tracking of how data is used is very important. All of these are core principles of security. They're across the board. And just to give you a feel, monitoring our systems, and I live very close to the service delivery, 89,000 IP addresses actively blocked just in one day. 5,931 new serious malicious intrusion attempts, blocked, of course. We use AI agents to defend against AI agent attacks. 58,000 hits from crawling bots of various sorts, 21,000 hits from AI crawling bots that are trying to feed AI agents that then are turned around to generate AI attacks. It goes on. 7,491 blocked spam inbound emails. It's pretty dire stuff. Behind that all, to survive that, you need to be conscious of the risk. You need to have defense in depth. That is consciousness of the layers that you need to defend. And it doesn't have to go badly. It sounds very scary, but there are some principles that you've already heard in these presentations about managing that risk. One that's very important is education. The library is a great educational delivery system. It does that in public libraries in teaching about online resources, and often now also in cyber awareness. And this is a crucial role. But each library institution can play a role in that cyber awareness development within the institution. It's not just for the staff, it's for the patrons. There's governance, and this whole risk analysis of the cyber risk is part of the important governance of the institution. And that can involve ensuring that you do maintain a vigilance, compliance with standards for security management, and you've seen some of those standards today. And also consciousness of the importance of the nature of the custodianship that the library has over important resources that go beyond the institution. Because with the sort of information services that library provides, it's quite unlike most institutions, because it is reaching out these days globally with information resources often, and is also a custodian longitudinally over time. So securing that resource is not just a thing for today, but also maintaining that for tomorrow. And finally, the issue of defense in depth, to have minimum trust on your systems. As the old saying goes, trust no one is very important in this architecture. Thank you indeed, and thank you for the other presenters. It was a very interesting session.
Thank you very much, Edmund. It's really very, very inspiring and thought-provoking, and I think your presentation is also very timely and very important for us. There are a lot of questions, so the thinking is that we will capture all the questions and we will share them with all speakers for comments, and then, of course, we will share them out with the whole of the registration. I will just take the remaining 6 minutes of this event to concentrate on two questions. One is a recurring, both of them are recurring in one or the other form. And I think, Edmund, you already touched upon this, so I will ask all of you to just give me a very brief input or reply in the question. I will include the question, of course, in the list of questions we will share with our users. And that is, Edmund, the intersection between AI and cybersecurity. I have here several questions on several questions starting how can threats emerging from the use of AI be addressed, because this is getting also a little bit more alarming, not just in libraries, but in every aspect of digital platforms. And there's also AI systems can be helpful at the same time. They are sort of like elements in cyber attacks. So I see a lot of questions and consideration over this intersection between AI and cybersecurity. So I'll give you the floor. I'll start with you, Edmund, and of course I will go around and take the opinion of all speakers.
Very well. Yes, AI does present a problem. The most prevalent is the way in which phishing attacks have become significantly more effective in crafting emails that entice the user, and also that combine on an automatic basis some malware that's much harder to detect by the defensive systems. But the principles of the attack via AI enhanced systems are no different from the defense of systems as a whole. In other words, the principles of managing the security of your system are largely the same. It just becomes harder because they become more sophisticated. It used to be that most attacks were coming from scripted attacks and could be defended by simple scripted defenses. But now with AI and the sophisticated use of complex attacks, but probably more important than AI, the introduction of state actors in crafting attacks is probably the most significant risk, because what you have in the case of state actors is agencies that are extremely well resourced to craft attacks, better resourced than most institutions are to craft defences. So the only path you have forward is following good standards in the crafting of your cyber defences. So there are good standards out there. Be current in your software. Demand currency in software and management, and good standards in security delivery from your IT services suppliers, and have a recovery forward. So for instance, within our institution, we have a cold standby system, backup DRP systems for recovery. So planning for recovery is also important.
I'd like to give the floor a little bit for a quick recap on that to Magnus, and we now see you, Magnus.
All right, I was saying that just to add a little to what has been said, the use of AI has actually generated more data in libraries. And of course, this exposes such data to threats that libraries need to be mindful of. Then AI also removes the subjective reasoning from human and computer interactions, which of course increases the vulnerability of our information system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Magnus. And Gwen, if you have anything to add on that?
I just think that one of the problems in cybersecurity and technology infrastructure and libraries in general and higher education is the difficulty in keeping staff levels for these specialized skills. I don't have an answer, but that Tima, you showed that the graph with where they thought that their skill set was versus where they needed their skill set. I think that is one of the huge issues facing all organizations going forward, is how do we develop those skills? How do we pay for those skills? And I think it's going to take, everyone is just going to have to become AI aware.
I want to take this opportunity to wholeheartedly thank our speakers for willing to share your interventions and these insights and your thoughts. I want to wholeheartedly thank my colleagues for organizing this wonderful event. I also see here a lot of questions, and Gwen, we will be looking from a response from you regarding a data breach policy from ELSEVIER, and also hopefully seeing a link to that policy so we can share it with the audience. We have over 1,000 people registered. I have more than 5 questions regarding third-party vendors and what is the level of protection there, because we talked about library. What about third-party vendors and what's that relation? So I would invite from your precious time, a couple of comments to the question we will share. So we will share it with all the audience. And of course, please give us links to your responses. And last but not least, my heartfelt thanks to everyone from all over the globe who connected for this event, and looking forward to seeing you all in our next event. And my sincere thanks to my colleagues, Ariel, Meg, Jenny, and everyone else that was involved to make this happen. Have a lovely afternoon, evening, or day. Ciao.